My name is Sarah, I'm 32 years old, and my story begins on what seemed like an ordinary evening. My husband's family had planned a trip to a beachfront resort in Florida. A vacation I had been eagerly anticipating. After years of being married to Ethan, I had always tried to integrate myself into his family, hoping that one day they would truly see me as one of their own. But then I realized, some things can never change, no matter how hard you try. Ethan and I arrived at the resort after a long flight. The turquoise ocean, golden sunlight, and salty breeze gave me a glimmer of hope that this trip might bring me closer to his family. But it didn't take long for reality to prove me wrong. At our very first dinner at an upscale beachfront restaurant, I sensed something was off. As the waiter led us to our table, I smiled and followed along, only for my mother-in-law Margaret to slowly shake her head. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," she said, placing the menu down. "Sarah will need a separate table." I froze, thinking I had misheard her. "Sorry, what do you mean?" I glanced around, making sure she wasn't talking about someone else. Margaret didn't even look at me. Instead, she gestured dismissively toward the waiter. "It's our family tradition. Daughters-in-law sit separately during family gatherings." I turned to Ethan, expecting him to speak up for me, but he only sighed and shrugged, as if this was nothing worth arguing over. "It's just how they do things, babe, it's not a big deal." I felt my stomach drop. A heavy silence settled over me, though no one else at the table seemed to notice. They had already moved on, flipping through their menus, chatting as if nothing unusual had happened. Not wanting to cause a scene in a crowded restaurant, I reluctantly took my place at the small table the waiter had prepared for me, just a few steps away from them. Sitting alone, I felt like an outsider among strangers. From where I sat, I could hear their laughter, their conversations, the family I was supposedly a part of, yet was never truly included in. I should have walked out right then. I should have realized this wasn't a misunderstanding, nor was it some random family tradition. It was a message, loud and clear, that I had never been one of them. But I stayed. I told myself that maybe this was just a quirky tradition I hadn't known about, maybe things would be better tomorrow. Maybe if I kept trying, his family would eventually open their hearts to me. I was wrong. The next morning I woke up early, excited to join them for breakfast. I sent Ethan a text asking where they were, but there was no response, so I wandered through the resort, searching for them among the crowded dining tables. And then I saw them. Ethan's family was already gathered around a large table, enjoying breakfast, their voices filled with laughter. Ethan sat there, chatting with his parents and sister, as if I didn't even exist. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. As I approached, I spoke gently. "Why didn't anyone tell me you were down here?" My father-in-law Richard glanced up, looking mildly surprised, almost as if my presence was entirely unnecessary. "We thought you'd figure it out." Margaret, still calmly stirring her coffee, added, "We have our own way of doing things, Sarah. You should start getting used to it." I turned to Ethan, hoping for some kind of reaction, an explanation, something to show that he cared. But he simply took another bite of his toast, not even a hint of guilt on his face. And that was when I finally understood. I didn't belong in this family. I had never been accepted, and Ethan, the one person who should have stood by me, had left me to fend for myself. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't someone who would let herself be trampled on. I let out a small, knowing smile, pulled out a chair and whispered softly, only loud enough for myself to hear. "Fine. If this is how you do things, then I have my own way too." I sat there quietly, watching them enjoy their breakfast as if I were invisible. The conversations, the laughter, the exchanged glances, all of it had no space for me. I should have known this wasn't just a misunderstanding. I should have accepted the truth. I stood up, keeping my expression polite. "I think I'll go for a walk." No one looked up. Ethan gave a lazy nod, not even bothering to ask where I was going or if I was okay. I walked out of the restaurant, feeling the warm Florida sun on my shoulders. The beach stretched out before me, waves rolling onto the shore, steady and unbothered. But I couldn't enjoy it. I had been married to Ethan for 3 years. 3 years of trying, of patience, of compromise, and yet I was still just an outsider in the family I had once hoped to call my own. But what hurt the most wasn't how his parents treated me. It was how Ethan stood by and let it happen. I pulled out my phone, opening my messages, about to type something to him. But then I stopped. What was I going to say? That I felt hurt? That I wished he would stand up for me? I had said these things hundreds of times before, and Ethan's response had always been the same. A shrug and the words I had grown to resent. That's just how they do things. I sighed, slipping my phone back into my bag. Instead of waiting for him to change, I decided to do something for myself. I walked to the front desk of the resort and asked about their activities. The receptionist smiled and recommended a sunset cruise that evening. It sounded perfect. At least I could create my own joy even if no one else cared to include me. Later that afternoon, as I returned to my room to change, I heard laughter coming from the balcony. Ethan sat with his parents and his younger sister Liana, sipping cocktails leisurely. On the table in front of them was the resort's itinerary, but what left me stunned was what was written on it. A yacht tour, the exact same one I had just booked. But I hadn't been invited. I stepped closer, my heart skipping a beat. You going on a yacht tour? I tried to keep my voice calm. Liana turned to me, completely unfazed. Yeah, Mom booked it in advance. Don't you want to take a walk on the beach instead? I swallowed hard. And what about me? Ethan, you didn't think to tell me? Ethan looked up, his expression as indifferent as always. I figured you'd find your own thing to do. You like your freedom. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Freedom? Was that what he called being abandoned? I took a deep breath, locking eyes with Ethan. You know what? I'm starting to understand. This isn't about traditions or family customs. This is about choice. You chose to leave me out. Ethan blinked, momentarily caught off guard by my tone. But before he could speak, his mother cut in. Sarah, don't be so sensitive. This family has always treated you well. I laughed, actually laughed for the first time since arriving here. But this time I couldn't hold back the frustration simmering inside me. Oh right, treating me well means seating me separately, excluding me from every meal and planning everything without even mentioning me? I turned to Ethan, giving him one last chance. Do you think this is okay? He said nothing. And in that silence I got my answer. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly light. If I'm not part of this family, then maybe it's time I start thinking that way too. I didn't wait for a response. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, anger and pain colliding inside me. But at that moment I also felt something else. They thought I would keep putting up with this. They thought I would sit around waiting to be treated better. But what they didn't know was that I had my own way of doing things. I returned to my room, closing the door behind me. For a moment I stood still, listening to the pounding of my own heartbeat. My whole body was shaking, but not from fear or hurt. It was from clarity. They wanted me to be invisible? Fine. I'd show them what disappearing really meant. I walked over to the desk, opened my laptop and began executing my plan. They had no idea that I was the one who had booked everything for this trip, from the hotel and rental car to the fancy dinners and the exclusive spa appointment Margaret had been looking forward to for weeks. Margaret liked to think she was in control, but she didn't realize I had always been the one handling the payments. Ethan never paid attention to finances, he only cared about enjoying the ride. And that would be their biggest mistake. I pulled up my email and started canceling everything. Hotel canceled. Rental car canceled. Romantic family dinner canceled. Margaret's special spa treatment canceled. I even called the hotel directly to ensure that none of them would be able to rebook their rooms immediately. Within 10 minutes, their perfect vacation had collapsed. And me? I had no intention of sticking around to see the fallout. I packed my bags swiftly, taking only what I needed. Grabbing the keys to the rental car, I left the hotel without a word to anyone. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow as I drove away from the resort, leaving the crashing waves behind me. My destination? Charleston, where I could finally enjoy a vacation on my own terms. I turned on the music, feeling a sense of ease settle over me for the first time in days. I didn't care what Ethan or his family would think once they realized I was gone. In fact, I was looking forward to that moment. The next morning, at the resort. Sipping my coffee on the balcony of my new hotel in Charleston, I gazed at the peaceful boats drifting along the water. Then my phone started buzzing. Again and again. I let it ring. A missed call. Then another. A message popped up. Ethan, where are you? I took another sip of coffee, staring out at the ocean with a satisfied smile. Another message followed. Ethan, what the hell did you do? The hotel says our reservations were cancelled. My parents are freaking out. I smirked. Of course they were. Another call. Margaret. I didn't bother answering. Then the messages came flooding in. Margaret, what have you done? The hotel says our rooms are gone. The rental car is gone too. What is the meaning of this? I set my phone down, savoring the peace of sitting alone, undisturbed. Finally, they were experiencing what I had gone through, the isolation, the helplessness, the frustration of being cast aside. A few minutes later, Ethan called again. This time I answered. Where are you? His voice was tense. I shrugged even though he couldn't see me. Charleston. Charleston, why are you there? I took a slow sip of my coffee, relishing the moment before replying. Because there are people here who actually value my presence. I heard Margaret shouting in the background. What has she done? Ethan, tell her to come back immediately. Ethan sighed. Sarah, do you realize how much trouble this is causing my parents? I cut him off. I know. And I don't care. A long silence followed. I could almost picture the confused look on Ethan's face. You can't just do this, Sarah. They're my family. I let out a soft laugh. You're right. They're your family. But you forgot one important thing. What? I tilted my head, speaking slowly and deliberately. I'm not part of it anymore. Then, I hung up. My phone buzzed again almost instantly, but I didn't even glance at it. Instead, I turned on my favorite playlist, leaned back in my chair, and let the ocean breeze wash over me. At the resort, chaos unfolds. Ethan slammed his phone onto the table, running a frustrated hand through his hair as his mother, Margaret, turned beet red with fury. What the hell did she do? Margaret nearly shrieked, her sharp eyes locking onto her son. Why did the hotel say our reservations were cancelled? Ethan sighed, trying to keep his composure. Mom, I told you, Sarah booked everything, and now she's cancelled everything. Richard, Ethan's father, slammed his hand on the table, nearly knocking over his glass of orange juice. What? You mean to tell me we don't have a room? What about the rental car? Ethan shook his head. That's gone too. Margaret's mouth fell open in disbelief. No, this can't be. I booked that spa appointment 3 weeks ago. She can't. Right then her phone buzzed, a message from the spa. Dear Margaret, we confirm that your spa appointment this afternoon has been cancelled per the request of the original booking party. Thank you, and we hope to serve you in the future. Her grip tightened around her phone, her entire body trembling with rage. She cancelled my spa appointment? Leanna, Ethan's younger sister, who had been silent up until now, widened her eyes. Sarah? Actually did this? Ethan nodded, staring off into the distance as if scrambling for a way to salvage the situation. She didn't just cancel, she left. Margaret shot to her feet, nearly knocking over her chair. Call her right now! Ethan picked up his phone, but all he saw was a list of missed calls. No replies. No sign that Sarah cared about their predicament. Mom. I've called her a dozen times, she's not answering. Richard shook his head and grabbed his own phone. I'll call another hotel, there has to be a room available somewhere. He dialed a number, but less than a minute later his expression darkened. No vacancies. Margaret took a deep breath. Keep calling. We can't be without a place to stay. They contacted every hotel near the resort, but the response was the same every time. Sorry, we're fully booked. Leanna frantically scrolled through her phone. I found one, but... All eyes turned to her. It's a 20-minute drive away and it's a roadside motel. Margaret looked like she was about to faint. A motel? Leanna, you must be joking. Leanna turned her screen around, showing the listing. A rundown motel with flickering neon lights, peeling walls, and a review score so low it was almost comical. But it was the only option left. Mom, there's nothing else. If we don't book it now, even this could be gone. Richard clenched his jaw. Fine. Book it. The motel. A nightmare stay. When they arrived, Margaret could hardly believe her eyes. A 3-story building with chipped paint, an oil-stained parking lot, and a dimly flickering sign that read, Blue Shore Motel, open 24/7. Leanna wrinkled her nose. Oh my God, what is that smell? Richard walked into the front desk, where a middle-aged man lazily tapped at an ancient cash register. We have a reservation, Richard muttered through gritted teeth. The man glanced at the list, then nodded. 3 rooms. Second floor, no elevator. Margaret's mouth fell open. We have to take the stairs? The clerk shrugged. If you want, I can move you to a first-floor room. Margaret let out a breath of relief. Good. I'll take that one. The man tapped at his computer. But it's a single room. If you switch, someone will have to sleep in the car. Margaret clenched her teeth. Fine. Second floor it is. They dragged their suitcases up the rickety wooden stairs, each step creaking under their weight. When Margaret opened her room door, she nearly collapsed. The bedsheets were wrinkled, the air conditioner rattled loudly, the ceiling light flickered like a scene from a horror movie. She turned to Richard, her voice rising in desperation. We cannot stay here. Richard, exhausted, sank onto the bed. Do we have another choice? Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, his face tense with anger. He picked up his phone and called Sarah again. The phone rang and rang and rang. No answer. Then, the screen lit up with a message from Sarah. Sarah, feeling comfortable. Ethan clenched his jaw, typing furiously. You can't do this to my family, they're losing their minds. Sarah read the message. But she didn't reply. Margaret sat down, gripping the arms of the chair. Ethan, call her back right now, tell her to return. We cannot let her do this to our family. Ethan typed another message. Sarah, what are you doing? Everyone is stuck here. A few seconds later, a new message appeared. Sarah, isn't this how your family does things? Ethan stared at the screen, frozen. Margaret snatched the phone from his hands, reading the message, her face turning red with fury. But no matter how angry they were, I was still peacefully enjoying my vacation while they were trapped in the very indifference they had once shown me. I lounged on the balcony of my Charleston hotel, a cold cocktail in hand, the sea breeze gently tousling my hair. A peacefulness settled over me, a feeling I hadn't known in a long time. Then my phone buzzed, pulling me back to reality. A message from an unknown number. Sarah, I heard what happened. I just wanted to say, you're not the first. I frowned and opened the message. The sender was Natalie, Ethan's cousin. I didn't know much about Natalie, just that she lived in another state and rarely attended family gatherings. But her words sent a strange chill through me. What do you mean? I typed back, a sinking feeling growing in my chest. Seconds later, Natalie replied. Ethan's ex-wife. Do you know about her? I blinked. Ex-wife? I knew Ethan had been married before, but he had always said they just weren't compatible and had parted ways amicably. I had never questioned it, I figured everyone had a past. But now, my stomach twisted. He said they divorced because they weren't a good match, I replied, an unease creeping over me. Natalie responded almost instantly. That's what he tells everyone. But that's not the truth. Do you want to know? I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen. Did I want to know? Part of me wanted to ignore it, to enjoy my peace without thinking about Ethan anymore. But another part of me needed to know. I took a deep breath. Tell me. Natalie sent a long message. Before you, Ethan was married to a woman named Olivia. When she joined the family, they treated her exactly like they treated you. They isolated her, forced her to sit separately, excluded her from family activities, and deliberately ignored her during important moments. She endured it for 2 years trying to fit in, but in the end, she couldn't take it anymore and left. Right in the middle of a vacation. Just like you. I gripped my phone tighter, every word cutting deep. I wasn't the first? But the worst part was yet to come. They call it a family test. They do this to every woman who marries into their family. If she's obedient, endures it without complaining, and proves herself, they might slowly accept her. But if she resists or leaves, they blame her and never speak of her again. And Ethan? He always sides with his parents. He always lets them control everything. Just like he's doing now. I could hardly believe what I was reading. A family test? A twisted game to see if I was worthy enough? I typed quickly, so what did Olivia do? Natalie responded immediately. She left Ethan and never looked back. Later, she told her family and friends what happened, but no one believed her. Ethan's parents told everyone she had personality issues, that she was too sensitive, and couldn't adapt. And Ethan never defended her. She went through hell, Sarah, just like you. I felt like I had been doused in cold water. Ethan had known. He had seen this happen to Olivia. He had known exactly what his family did to their daughters-in-law. And he let it happen anyway. No, not just let it happen. He had been complicit. I hadn't realized how tightly I was gripping my phone until my knuckles ached. I closed my eyes trying to steady myself, but my mind reeled with memories. Every moment of exclusion on this vacation, every lonely meal, every trip they planned without me, the way Ethan always shrugged whenever I tried to express how I felt. I wasn't the first. And if I did nothing, I wouldn't be the last. Taking a deep breath, I opened my phone and searched for a name I had never thought about before. Olivia. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let this story end like the ones before. The next morning I woke up in my Charleston hotel room, feeling more at peace than I had in years. No more hushed conversations from my in-laws, no more disapproving glares from Margaret, and most importantly, no more Ethan. I pulled back the curtains, letting the warm sunlight flood the room. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. I made myself a cup of coffee and picked up my phone. Still dozens of unread messages, from Ethan, from Margaret, even from Richard. I skimmed past them without replying. But then, one message stopped me cold. Then, Sarah, I had no other choice. I called the police. I blinked, a chill running down my spine. Right then my phone rang, an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello? Good morning, this is Officer Daniels from the Hilton Head Police Department. We received a missing person report. Are you Sarah Mitchell? I tightened my grip on the phone, keeping my voice steady. Yes, I'm Sarah, but I'm not missing. A brief pause. Can you confirm that you left voluntarily? I let out a dry laugh. Not only did I leave voluntarily, but I was the one who booked every part of that trip. I don't know what my husband told you, but I can assure you I am completely fine and very much not missing. Officer Daniels cleared his throat. I understand. However, your husband reported that you left without notice, haven't answered his calls, and that he's concerned for your safety. I clenched my jaw, anger bubbling up. He's not worried about my safety, he's worried that I won't come back to play the obedient wife for his family anymore. Daniels was silent for a moment before speaking carefully. Would you like us to document this? If you feel uncomfortable with him contacting you, we can assist you in requesting a no-contact order to prevent further calls and messages. I gazed out at the distant waves, feeling a slow simmering rage rise within me. Ethan was no longer the man I once loved. He had become someone obsessed with control. Someone who couldn't accept that I had the right to leave. I took a deep breath, then spoke firmly. Yes. I want to request that Ethan stop contacting me, and if he continues to harass me, I want to know the legal steps I can take to protect myself. Daniels noted it down. I'll send you the necessary information. If you need further assistance, don't hesitate to reach out. I thanked him and hung up. As soon as I did, another message popped up on my screen. Ethan, Sarah, you've taken this too far. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. I didn't reply. Instead, I scrolled down to Ethan's name in my contact list and blocked his number. Just like the way he had slowly erased me from his life, bit by bit, until I no longer existed. Meanwhile, in Hilton Head, Ethan threw his phone onto the bed, his face flushed with anger. She blocked me. Margaret, sitting at the edge of the shabby motel bed, crossed her arms in frustration. She dares to do this? We have to do something. Liana, Ethan's younger sister, sighed. Mom, maybe we should just stop. Sarah doesn't want to come back, and I don't think forcing her will help anything. Margaret snapped her head toward her daughter. What did you just say? Whose side are you on? Liana leaned back in her chair, looking exhausted. I'm just saying, maybe she was right. Ethan shot to his feet. This can't end like this. She's my wife. She can't just walk away over a misunderstanding. Richard, Ethan's father, looked at his son with growing disappointment. If you want her back, you'll have to do something smarter than calling the police. Margaret nodded, her eyes sharp. She thinks she can walk away from us so easily? We'll make sure she regrets it. Ethan let out a long breath, staring down at his phone. He never thought Sarah would actually leave. But now she hadn't just left, she had cut him off completely. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he had lost control. I sat in the small conference room of my hotel in Charleston, my hands clasped together, my mind surprisingly calm. In front of me was a long table with a few neatly placed bottles of water. I didn't need anything elaborate, I just needed the truth. Outside, I could hear the familiar voices arguing. Margaret's sharp as a blade, Richard speaking quietly to Ethan, probably trying to regain control of the situation. But none of them realized that the dynamics had changed. I was no longer the woman they could push around. The door swung open and Ethan entered first. His eyes met mine, but all I saw in them was hesitation and confusion. Margaret and Richard followed, their faces tight with frustration, while Liana hesitated for a moment before stepping in. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, a faint smile on my lips. Good. Everyone's here. Sit down. Margaret slammed her purse onto the table, her glare seething. Why did you call us here, to mock us over some petty drama? I raised an eyebrow. Petty? Interesting choice of words. Ethan sighed and pulled out a chair. Sarah, can we talk alone? No, I answered instantly, my voice cold. We talk here. Because this isn't just about you and me. This is about your family and their disgusting traditions. Margaret clenched her purse strap tightly, barely masking her irritation. What exactly are you accusing us of? I placed my phone on the table, turned the screen toward them, and scrolled up to reveal one of Margaret's threatening messages. Do you remember sending me this? Margaret's eyes flicked to the screen, and I caught the briefest hesitation in her expression before she straightened her shoulders, her mask of composure settling back into place. I was merely trying to remind you that family is important. I let out a cold laugh. By threatening me? By trying to force me back after I had already made my decision? I leaned forward, my voice sharp. How many times have you done this, Margaret? How many women have you pushed to their breaking point before me? Richard crossed his arms, his voice rough with irritation. What nonsense are you talking about? I turned my gaze to Ethan. Olivia. His face turned to stone. I nodded slowly. That's right. Your cousin told me everything. Olivia went through this too. She was isolated, made to feel like she didn't belong. And when she left, what did your family do? Smeared her name, called her difficult, said she just couldn't fit in. Margaret turned to Ethan, fire in her eyes. She's lying. Ethan, say something. But Ethan said nothing. And that was the answer. I shook my head, crossing my arms again. You knew, didn't you? You knew exactly what they did to your first wife, and yet you let them do it again? To me? Ethan ran a hand over his face, his voice weak. Sarah, I didn't think it was that bad. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You didn't think? Ethan, they pushed me out of every family activity. They made me feel invisible in my own marriage, and you stood there, shrugged, and said, That's just how they do things. You didn't think? He had nothing to say. Margaret lifted her chin, her voice cold. You're blowing this out of proportion. This is simply how our family operates. I took a deep breath before speaking slowly. No, this is not how a family operates. This is manipulation. This is a power game. Margaret opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand, cutting her off. And I'm done playing. I stood up, and the tension in the room thickened instantly. Ethan lifted his head, for the first time during this entire conversation, a hint of panic in his expression. Sarah? What are you doing? I met his gaze, unwavering. Divorcing you. Ethan went still. You can't be serious. I shrugged. Believe it or don't, it doesn't change anything. Margaret shot up from her chair. You can't just leave this family over a little misunderstanding? I smirked. I'm not leaving because of a misunderstanding. I'm leaving because I finally understand everything. Ethan stood up, reaching for my hand, but I stepped back. Sarah, wait. I can fix this. I cut him off. You don't want to fix anything, Ethan. You just want to cover it up, so I'll keep enduring it like before. But I'm done. I turned away, walking toward the door. Ethan called my name one last time. Sarah. I paused for just a second, glancing back at him. Goodbye, Ethan. And then I walked out of that room, out of their lives, and I never looked back. 6 months later, I stood by the window of my new apartment in Charleston, sipping warm tea as I looked out over the city lights. No more lonely dinners at my in-laws' table. No more judgmental stares. No more feeling like an outsider. I was free. The divorce with Ethan took exactly 6 months. At first, he didn't believe I was serious about ending things. He called, texted, even drove to Charleston to see me. but I never opened the door. I didn't need to hear more empty apologies. I had spent too many years believing promises that never came true. At first Ethan tried to be patient. He sent flowers to my office, left messages full of regret. I know I was wrong, I'll change. We can start over. I love you, Sarah, please don't let go. But I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Then, when he realized I wasn't wavering, his tone changed to anger. You really want to throw everything away? You're destroying our marriage. You're more selfish than I thought, Sarah. I smirked when I read those. Who was really the selfish one in this story? I felt no guilt. I owed no one an explanation. After I signed the divorce papers, Ethan disappeared from my life. But through mutual friends, I heard that things hadn't been so easy for him. For the first time, he started seeing his family for who they really were. With no one left to blame, Margaret turned her frustration toward Ethan. She couldn't stand the fact that I had left, that I hadn't come crawling back for forgiveness like she had expected. So she turned on her own son, the one she deemed responsible for losing me. You're useless, Ethan. A real man wouldn't let his wife walk away like that. Richard, who always acted like the family patriarch, now sounded exhausted. This should never have gone this far. Couldn't you control your wife? For the first time in his life, Ethan was caught in the middle, between his parents and the reality that I was never coming back. The only person who seemed to understand was Leanna. I heard she had a huge argument with her mother. Did you really think you could treat her like that, and there'd be no consequences? Sarah did the right thing. But Margaret would never admit she was wrong. She blamed me. She blamed Ethan. She even blamed Leanna. But never once did she take a moment to look at herself. Ethan slowly realized his family wasn't as perfect as he had believed. Without me there to play the dutiful wife keeping things together, all their conflicts started to surface. But none of that mattered to me anymore. I had broken free from their toxic cycle. I found a new job in Charleston, a management position at an event planning company. I met new people, spent peaceful afternoons by the beach, and most importantly, I was no longer tied to a family that had never accepted me. One day I ran into Natalie, Ethan's cousin, at a small cafe. She smiled when she saw me. You look so much happier, Sarah. I nodded, because I am. We talked for a while, and before she left, Natalie gently placed a hand over mine and whispered, You're the first one who truly walked away. You did what no one else had the courage to do. I didn't reply, I just smiled. I didn't need to be the first. But I wouldn't be the last. One evening, as I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, my phone buzzed. Ethan's name lit up the screen. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the message. I get it now, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I stared at it for a long time. Then I swiped my finger across the screen and deleted it. No reply, no regret. Because I was finally free. Sarah's story, a journey to self-worth. Sarah's story isn't just about a divorce. It's about reclaiming self-worth after years of being undervalued. Too many people stay trapped in toxic relationships, believing that if they try harder, if they're more patient, things will change. But the truth is, you can't change someone who doesn't want to change. Sometimes, the only way to be respected is to walk away, not because you're weak, but because you deserve